yalo ni bota serekunda marché kon mana silo men bota kata boy bir kama silo kan supa bala ma fan wo abbe wo silo le ngaji lone hani so man tanu nga futa nga korda ni don.
Yeah, after this whole thing, a committee was formed, which I was part of, so that we can pursue this matter with the government. In fact, but it was a very long time, and all those people were new people to me. But there is one person among them whom I can remember very well. His compound is just close to Sopabad, the place called Sopabad. And I know the compound, I can still go right to that compound even today. But to say that I know them or can remember them, no, I cannot. But a group was formed so that we can pursue the matter.
And can you tell us what the membership of this group was? Not the names, but what were the aims and objectives?
Ako alio kafo melondi wanya. Aka manghani me tolufo wala ma bodula lufo. Bari Allah o kafo men alialo wanya. Iko Allah hammo mumunetinu.
Na hammo muneti benti ko ngani kuya ko men soto kurka itandi man sakundala ko ndung lufata nyame.
Our intention was, because of the loss that we suffered, to present that to the government and tell them that we have lost our children.
And was the group formed of victims of the 10th and 11th of April?
Ako folu wo kafo molu. Menu la dindingulu fata April karo tiltang aninga tiltang ninkilungu wolle kafuta nyoma wonyabang?
Yes, they were the ones.
Did you achieve anything eventually?
Ako fo alnata ku soto akwoto le bang alnata ku bondije le bang.
Nga memmo ya akwoto be na tawla fo ko sila ye luwa alandi le ko mo kana ko mo fo ne wala ko tek wala akwode taw nyala nte aluni mbeta maka soto akwoto.
What I know about that is that after that there was a law that was passed and that nobody should ever speak about the incident again, and that was how the whole committee died.
And how did you feel about that law that was passed, which basically silenced you?
Ako silang ite yo ta nyadi le yo lua melondi purumo kana kumo fu koteke andung lua le melondi sayang atil na ta nyadi le
aponte nga ta nyame.
Well, say how I took it personally.
Dengaje ko Africa ka ma problem babe Africa bul ni keta nyaton koti.
I see that there is a big problem in Africa, because if you are a leader, before you get there, there were people before you. And the place that you occupy, there are other people also occupying such places. And when you vacate that place, someone else is going to come. You should see yourself as a human being and should have sympathy for human beings. You should also think for the whole of humanity. You should work peace for all humanity. Never forget, the only power that lasts is the power of God. That is what is taking Africa backwards, and that is what will always take Africa backwards. That was in my mind. I was thinking about that anger. But you see, the anger of the heart, it is only the heart that can bear it.
Can you tell us if whether you know if the authorities learned about the death of your son at some point?
Ako fo be kola fo o nyaton ko lunata kulong ila dindula saya to leba.
Konkol fo niamo nyaton ko libe kulon ne la koto iye la moyla.
This is what I am saying. Before leaders get to know about your issue, they must have listened to you. But if they do not listen to you, how can they know about your situation?
Mr. Sajaw, at some point, were you approached by members of the government?
Ako fo wati sotondale bang mansakundala molu sifutema watu omeng purka akmo diamun purke diamun di akola.
Inatale ko inata sang konton la.
They came to sympathize.
Inatale ko inata sang konton la.
They came to sympathize.
Ning envelope of 5,000 lebije.
They came with an envelope containing 5,000.
Mandia mulakang.
They did not make any statement. They did not listen to whatever we might have to tell them. What they said was we were sent by the government to come and express our condolences. They handed over the money. And
Please
so they
take it slowly, Mr. Sajaw. They have to interpret. Just take it easy.
What he was saying that when these people came, they came with an envelope. They said that they were sent by the government. But when they came, they just said, we are sent by the government, and they passed the envelope and said, well, here is a token for the condolence. And that's the time they left, because they didn't even waste time there.
Do you know who these people were?
Ako foyo molu lonne jumanyol lem.
That was the first day I'm seeing them.
That was the last time.
Do you remember any of their names?
Ako foy hakilo sibula moto la le wulu kono bang.
Komi nim nte bota jambi nim men benta jam nin so man nin jama benta tasu tola sako men tata sanji mo kono fanim fe.
Just like here now, if I live here and I meet with people that I met with today, I will not be able to recognize them. Much more people that I have met more than 10 years ago.
But they did confirm to you that they were sent by the government.
Bari yenying bamban yenying kwendile ko mansakundale yekina.
That they were sent by the government, yes.
And it is correct that they must have been aware of your son's death in order to come and pay their last respects to him.
Woto ay nyina itandiko woto ibota idimala sa ya kalamale wodalilo le ya sabu ko ina ta sanga kontongola.
It could be that way, it's true.
And how did it make you feel not having that opportunity to talk to them or confront them about your son's death?
Ako silang inata woje nyadile iman silo soto purka dia muye ke idimula saya fango foye iman silo soto wo inata woje inata wota nyadile.
Pai ngo makilum le fa ko ni be nyato e salon ini molle beti ni be koma e salon ni molle bi ilaban ko ko do be dawde si molle bi kata hakilo la wala mo adama di wala kayrote mo la fa.
Yeah, what I was saying was that wherever you are always with people. So as far as you are always with people, one should always think of those people, just as I said before. Yes, that's how I see things.
And who do you hold responsible for your son's death?
Silang, idingula saya amunta ite jumale tumi, isi jumale chodino kafo, ndingula saya asababo munyineti.
Ntafo asababo kodna o momo isafo president ya jamela o atokon menne kidota o ye bundiroke wol fanam be ma ta saw bara sembe ma menga kanodi pour kate bon wolomo aduni la baten dun si jikinoko wolomo ya jameti katu na keta nin ko no mata fa lonta danta jamme ko fisata bara keta danta kuma manyam folaje salon sembo botata de sembo si bona telebul sembo botano ateda malbul de lata wal.
Well, what I believe about the whole case is that when things like this happen, those who took guns and shot the children might have orders from somewhere. And after all the incident, when an order comes to say that nobody should discuss about this, well, that's really clear that it's from somebody who is all-powerful. And that all-powerful person, I think, at that time, can only be Yaya Jammeh.
Can you tell me whether those people who actually shot at the students, you refer to them as the paramilitary unit of the police, do you know if any one of them were actually held responsible for your son's death?
Ko bitum men ye kidifayo kije wolem ko e fanga la jeroto para lem nyim para polisol so fo wo be kola fo manna kulongole manki bar soto ka fo inata momutale ka fo men isa fo no men ko nyille dindungulu bum me ya lon ko isa mari londi to nyaka misali kama fo wo kumanna soto
ngo kuma kilmo jabi ka fo ko ku keta banko kam fo mol fata je ku fimman bojeto amman hininka amman fi ofin komi hanisi sero ni atara fata silo ko isbala fa malo mun ya fa sako hado madi ku man foje ku man kije salo sembo ta membol wo kilimo doron ngolo mutajeto.
Just as I said before, the statement I made earlier on, when things like this happen in the country, they should be investigated. Even if a chicken is found dead on the highway, you feel sympathetic for it. But for things to happen like this, and then for a statement to be made that nothing should be, nobody should talk about it.
Have you received any kind of consolation or compensation from the government for the loss of your son?
Ulube tambiring fo imanna buluma sayro sotong me ya lonko isa dila nyin kama ko ha ite fanam bonota moleto nyin kokono woto silang nyimmuta be buluma sayla nyinna pour financi nyimmuta fo manna o fananke ban
o ngal ilawo na kilingu mem fek na taylo tan kunto ko ne ko ma sakunda lenki na nata san konto yembulo ko landi e polita.
That was the only visit they made when they came and announced that they were sent by the government and handed over that envelope and left. That was the only time.
Do you feel that was adequate compensation for your loss?
Ako fo ila mirarodo fo dum buluma sayro le timme ya lonko asi dingo jo sayno
o yemendi nan ta faynola ta kenola ta lon bari away kam fa la fale ay nimiso la fale ay jafro la fale wadi din ala damale ya a jo long e wulu fay sako e ka fendi ala ko to ko tiaje ko wolo ma fonte wolo bi.
Well, how I can take that is that if somebody comes and say that we are here for to pay our condolences to the child's death, they just brought that envelope. Well, that amount they brought has only increased our anger because it cannot do anything for us. Well, they brought that money, we took it, but apart from that, nothing else happened. So that money is not significant for us because nobody can replace a human being's life. Nobody can compare a human being's life to anything else. So that's how I saw it.
What has the impact been for you and your family after your son was killed?
Biring idima fata nyama teng. Silang anata mumira le sabu ma ye ko nyinje nyameng itenila dimbayalo.
O ay kolya kubale nate katu ko ku ketela ay dimin ay nimisa ay jahali alal nato no late kan salo nyimbota bari ni jon inyon jon dingo ayela sembo kela ay tilimbali akokela ni la fan furkasino ka kolebul.
It brought a lot of hardships into our lives, brought a lot of regret, a lot of anger also. If something like that happened and through a natural cause, you can understand. But if your fellow human being uses their powers to mete out such things to you, it becomes difficult for you, such that even when you lie down in the night, you are unable to sleep.
What about the child's mother?
Ko dindingu bama wo fanan yata nyadile.
Alwo jama ban kafa keola miro jama mbekili adamadin mbekili bari kewol la miro jama ba ka janju solo kono bar muso la miro jama ba ka bonde nya jewlat anin do mori bali ala na nyon o kilon le boket lota dal o kilon do atarta won yalla.
Just as I told you earlier on, we are all human beings and we all have feelings, but you see, men, mostly when they are sad, they are able to keep it inside their hearts. But for the women, they are unable to, and this sometimes has to manifest itself by way of them crying and refusing to take food.
And can you just explain how you felt when your 2-year-old son was killed right in front of your eyes?
Ako silang wotembo mune dunta isondo moto ifango beje idingo mem sanji fula dindingo ti yofa ite fango nyala.
Alo yi umukule to komi do ngani sembe do yakino mem sembo ni sembo tela sembe to na tay ku kela mandi ko ni kamfata fuaro ni kamfata e kata jisu malla yemi kato so ni ifana ku no damal min yakenna ngaje wo nyama ay dimin na dangla ay ni mi sanmi so jala ay jahlo dangla bari simu nek.
Well, this is something which is very painful because when this thing happened, we felt the pain, we felt the regret, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. But what can you do? If a poor man gets angry, where you have no powers to do anything, you just take cold water and drink and sit down. That's the only thing you can do because you have no powers to do anything else.
Your feeling of powerlessness and helplessness, are you attributing that to your status in life?
Ako ila o sembenta ya aning ila o kuno balia munta ko ila baluo Kenya le yo sabu bang. Itaranya betaranya mento wala yo sabu.
Betaranya menta wala mo kato ko to nyamo ni atari bi America la sembo le bela ni ya yo ken.
Yes, it's my situation, because if I was as powerful as America or had America's power, yeah, Jammeh would not have spent the night at State House that day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. Mr. Chairman, we have come to the end of the testimony. I will now hand over to the commissioners for any questions they may ask, and then back to the witness for any final words.
Akoy numbara bake Mr. Sajaw abe jaila abe numbara la ila wakilo ila songo kana CDRO la jang saing akati la nyinin karo bandale silang commission la sirantiwo aning a commission nyolu menu bi aning commission menu bi jang saing ay ko sawndi wolle bulu ni me nyinin kar soto wolu kono ibe nyinin kalale aning no be botala nite fong fana kuma soto ila fta men fala gambian ko le commission e jamba wala ila fta fem fala ifana mbo silo soto la.
Thank you very much, my counsel, and thank you very much, Mr. Sajaw, for your testimony.
Ako abe council numbara la meye nyininka ite Mr. Sajaw fanang abe numbara la abe jaila.
I'm truly sorry that you had to endure so much suffering following the death of your child.
Ako nyinketa balafati balafale me alon ko itul fanalu ya suno jele pour ila sanji fula dindingo la saya Kenya.
Commissioners, if you have any questions, please indicate.
Ako commissioner lu sila nimme nyininkar soto commissioner lu kono fo mobe soto la jeme be nyininkala.
If there are no questions, Mr. Sajaw, if you have any final remarks, concluding remarks to make, please proceed to do so now.
Ako bitungwairi commissioner lu me nyininka saying ite fanan na miraroto e be lafila ka kuma kan men fo commissioner liye wala be lafila ka kuma kan men fo pour banko molu samoy ite fanan ila sila kuma kan fo no natara misal kama kuma beda
right kuma benda nta men benda men be akilo nta be fo no la bare ale ngarje ngamen fo no so fo no.
Well, I have some few things to say. I have a lot to say, but what I can say here is not going to be long.
Africa, ntebe diamul Africa le,
What I want to say is to the whole of Africa.
Mbe Gambia le jang.
We are here in the Gambia.
Bari Africa nyanta katala nga adamadingol la nyobunya sabatindino.
But what Africa should try right now is to respect the rights of the people. The moment that is established properly, there will be peace. Whichever position a human being holds, you should know that it doesn't belong to you. It is the people who put you there. But what happens here in Africa is that when a person is given a position, immediately that person will start thinking that he or she is better than all the people. That's what is taking Africa backwards. And to take that out of Africa will be very difficult. When you have a child, a small child, if that child becomes a thief, started stealing at a tender age, you leave that child to grow up and one day you come and tell the child to stop stealing, he will say you are mad. Africa, let's be serious with what has been entrusted to us. Wherever you are entrusted or whatever you are entrusted with, try to be very right and do things accordingly. If someone is entrusted with a position or a place, the person starts thinking that this thing belongs to me, it all belongs to me. Whoever is made a leader, if he is a right-minded person, the way he or she thinks is, I will not bring trouble into my country. What I will try to do is to maintain peace in this country, to try and bring a good living for the people and try to do things that will take the country forward, that will establish and maintain development in the country. Wherever human being is, the first thing you should do is to avoid conflicts. If you look at conflicts, how it starts and where it ends, you cannot judge. If you look at things in everywhere in the world where there are conflicts, the reason for their retardation is always due to those conflicts. However angry you are, don't burn down your own house or else you will sleep outside. The country, it started with a compound, it became a village, and now it became a country. If I should happen to violate the rights of another compound, I should know that I'm doing it to myself. Tribes. If you look at it, Arabs, white men, Chinese, all these people, if you kill any one of them and leave it at a place up to 1 year, if you come back and look at that corpse, you will not know whether this person was a black man or he was a white man, a Chinese or whatever. You will not be able to distinguish. But if you establish truth in your country, and in your village or town, in your compound, whenever you arrive at that position, you will always be happy.
Allahu Akbar. Silang siyam po nye drong nte abe fo no bari tolle hakilo yirwatan tati.
Now I am begging for you people to forgive me. You have more broad minds than me. So, what we should do is let's try to kick away conflicts and trouble. What is incumbent on us is to come together, try to be one and support each other. To be literate and illiterate, that makes no difference. Even if you are highly literate, that shouldn't make you to look low on those who are illiterate. Because that illiterate also, one fine day, he might be able to see where you are seeing at the present moment. Please forgive me if I happen to say anything offensive here. That's the limit of my mind. If I am able to say anything that is truth, then it is the will of God. But I am appealing to the people. Let's try to avoid trouble or conflicts. Let's try to avoid conflicts. Let's try to have one mind and have one intention. Without that, we will not able to progress. Please forgive me, I am stopping here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sajaw, for those very wise remarks.
Commission Chairman ko numbara bake Mr. Sajaw ilawo kumaka nyimmalu kang.
Before we take a break, Council, are we ready with the second witness of the day? And we can try to choreograph from the rest of the day. What happened?
Yes.
Please inform us.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the witness is waiting and is able to appear before the commission at the next sitting.
Splendid. We will take a 30-minute break and come back at 12:05. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Council, are we ready with the next witness? If we are, can we proceed? Please.
Mr. Chair, the witness is being brought into the hearing hall.
Thank you.
I, Dr. Marie Tujalo, do swear that I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jallo.
Good afternoon, Council.
Welcome to the TRRC.
Thank you very much.
My name is Esa Mbaifal. We've already met. You're called here today to testify about the events after or during the April 10th, 11th, 2000 students' demonstration in Banjul and other places in the country, wherein a number of students were shot, killed, and some injured. Can you testify to that fact?
Yes, please.
Good. Before you start your testimony, I just want to remind you that you have taken an oath to speak the truth. It is a criminal offense under the laws of this country to lie under oath. That's the offense of perjury. It is also an offense under the laws of this commission to lie before the commission. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Good. So if you do not understand a question that I have asked, please ask for clarification. Okay, but in any case, you are expected to speak the truth and nothing but the truth. You understand?
Yes, I do understand.
Okay, wonderful. So what are your full names?
I am Maria Tujalo.
And what is your date of birth?
I was born on the 12th of October, 1954.
Whereabout were you born?
I was born in Banjul. It was then Bathurst.
Yes. And where did you go to school?
I started my primary school at the Mohammedan Primary School from 1960 to 66. From then on, I went to Ghana and did primary 5 and 6 again, took the common entrance, and went to a girls' high school called Eburi Girls High School, where I did from Form 1 to Upper 6. From there, I went to the University of Science and Technology, where I did my medical degree. And then in terms of education, I had the opportunity also to go to Nairobi to do a postgraduate in pediatrics that is taking care of children. And I had another opportunity also in schooling to do a master's degree in health policy, management and evaluation at the University of Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, essentially, it is correct to call you a medical doctor.
Yes, please.
Can you give us a brief itinerary of your, or iteration rather, of your medical practice in Gambia?
When I came back from Ghana in 1985, I worked as a medical officer in the Royal Victoria Hospital then, and from there, I worked as a pediatrician. From there, I was the head of the hospital as CEO. From there,
Could you provide dates, if possible? You may refer to your written statement, if possible.
Okay. In terms of work experience, I returned to the Gambia in 1975, where I volunteered in the laboratory.
Doctor, don't necessarily read out the statement. Just give us the dates relative to the positions that you held.
Okay. Pediatrics I was the CEO, pediatrics in 1997, CEO then to the hospital. In 2003, deputy director, and then 2007, director. I went back to the hospital. In 2008, as the chief medical director. In November 2008, I was Minister of Health and relieved of that position in October 2009.
And what do you do now?
Now I work in ECG Sibano Health Center as the CEO and the lead doctor.
So essentially you have not only practiced medicine at the biggest hospital in the country, you participated in the management of that hospital and also in the management of the health sector of this country, correct?
Yes, correct.
And in April 2000, you worked at RVH, correct?
Yes, I did.
And during that period, what was your exact position?
I was the Chief Executive Officer.
Could you tell us what are the functions of Chief Executive Officer of the hospital?
Mainly, it was the day-to-day running of the hospital, making sure that patients got the treatment they got, taking care of the units that...
Making sure that patients got the treatment they got, or making sure that patients got the treatment they needed? Which was your responsibility?
They needed.
All right, okay, proceed, please.
And then recruiting appropriate doctors for the hospital and dealing with requests from the public, looking at letters that came in, and other administrative duties.
Would it also be your responsibility to implement policies of the government regarding the health sector as far as they relate to the hospital?
Yes, as far as it relates to the hospital.
Essentially, you are the boss of the hospital.
Essentially, yes.
The final decisions regarding administration of the hospital rested with you, correct?
Correct.
So anything that happened in the hospital would be your responsibility, wouldn't it, during that time?
It would be.
Could you tell us what happened in April 10th and 11th in the year 2000 at the RVH?
Yes, sir. On that day, I received a call from downstairs because the office of the CEO and administration was upstairs near the Marina Parade. And then I received a call that people were brought in, rushed in with severe injuries.
Make it a little bit slow because there is interpretation in the local languages for those of the audience in the hall. So take it a bit slowly. Yeah? Thank you very much, Doctor. You may proceed.
Okay. So I went downstairs and saw for myself that young people were brought in with severe injuries. Some were bleeding. They were all in some kind of distress.
What kind of injuries did you observe? You know, you said some were bleeding, but what are the types of injuries you observed?
They were very serious injuries, some with broken limbs and some with open wounds, big open wounds.
At that stage of that initial look, were you able to determine what were the causes of those injuries?
I would not be able to determine, but I heard rumors that these children were shot. Those injuries were very severe injuries, so it must be something that was really serious to have caused those injuries.
And as a result of that, what did you do?
Then the whole hospital was mobilized. In fact, before I got there, some had already come. Doctors, nurses, anesthetists, all people were on board. And the theaters were prepared. Those who needed blood transfusion, we tried to make sure that all those things were in place. And administratively, we set up a unit at the duty room. The duty room is where the 24-hour surveillance of the hospital was done. When we closed, there was some senior person at the duty room who would take...
A bit slowly, please. Proceed.
Who would take the information and relay it in the morning to us. So we used that area as a sort of center where we would help relatives and loved ones who were coming around to look for their children or their loved ones. And that was where we collated information, helped people to find their loved ones, whether they were dead or they were in theater or they were admitted.
Okay. People arrived at the hospital with different types of injuries, with different degrees of severity. Tell us what happened to the dead people.
The dead people were taken, when the doctor certifies that a patient had died, they were wheeled to the mortuary.
Do you know how many deaths were registered at the hospital?
In total, there were 12, and from the combos and 2 from up country. I think it was Birkam.
Essentially, 14. You had 14 deaths.
Yes, please.
Right. Okay, that's the figure you recall.
Yes.
Okay. How about injuries? Tell us what was done with regards to those who were injured.
Those who were injured were admitted. Some did not have very severe injuries, so they did not need to have operations. So those were admitted. Others who needed emergency operations were operated upon.
Do you have any idea how many people were hospitalized and how many people were discharged as outpatients?
I cannot remember the figures, but it may go to more than 15. I cannot remember exactly.
15, you said?
Yes.
Okay. I have given you 2 categories of patients. The first category is those who were admitted, those who were hospitalized. Do you recall how many they were?
I cannot recall the exact number.
How? Proceed, please.
But I do remember about 4 patients who had severe injuries and were followed up, who later went for further, some went for further treatment.
That is correct. We would come back to that later. We just want to establish the number of people, the number of victims who were hospitalized as a result of the shooting on the students.
As I said, I can't remember the exact figure, but it may be around 15 or something like that.
Around 15. All right. We would take that figure as your approximation of the number. How about those who were treated, seen at the hospital, and discharged on the same day? Do you have numbers for us?
No.
Because we want to be able to establish the number of victims who suffered direct harm.
I would think that the records of such would be in the hospital.
All right. We would make an effort to get those records. But from your own recollection, could you give us an estimate? If you cannot, you cannot. You cannot. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So those who were injured, you said you performed various types of interventions on them. Could you give us a brief description of those interventions?
Actually, I was not the surgeon doing the operations, but I know that 3 people, one of them suffered some injuries on the foot, another one on the spine, and another one had a major abdominal surgery. Those I remember vividly. but the exact type of operations I will not be able to say.
All right, that is true. Thank you very much. You said earlier on that you set up a unit at the duty room to provide information to family members. How did that function?
Many people were rushing to the hospital to find out what was happening. And we had records of the number of patients who were seen and those who died and those who were admitted. So when anybody comes and asks about a relative, maybe give a name, we look at that list and say, okay, if we know the person has died, we let them sit down, calm them down, and try to break the news to them. And those who had relatives or loved ones who were admitted, we would tell them, okay, go to this ward, your patient, your relative is there. So that is how it functioned. And also, the other things we needed, like we would make sure that the theater was having the things they needed, people were on the ground, and everything generally was as orderly as it could be.
What would you say to the suggestion by others that the scene was chaotic, completely different from orderly? What do you say to that?
The scene was very chaotic. That is why we decided to have this, this duty room to be able to sort out things there and to be able to help family members make sense of what was happening. Because otherwise somebody would come and go to all the wards to look for somebody, or wouldn't know whether to go to the mortuary or whether the patient is in theater or not. It was very disorderly.
And as a result of that disorderliness, were there any negative consequences on the well-being of the patients?
There could be, because in such situations, you need to keep out the crowd and make sure that only those who need to be there are there. And it was really very difficult because it was a major event, major disastrous event, and it was difficult. And I did not know before I heard it from the commission, and from one radio program I heard that there was someone who was taken to the mortuary and was not dead. I heard that, but I did not know it at the time I was as CEO until I heard it over the radio, and I heard it as testimony.
What is the normal practice at the hospital with regards to sending a patient or sending a body or a person to the mortuary? What's the usual procedure?
When anybody died or you felt the patient had died, there are signs that you have to look for. You have to check for the pulse, the respiration. You also have to look at the eyes to see whether the pupils are fixed and dilated. So those were the signs that should be looked for before you could certify that somebody has died.
That is true. That is the scientific process of certification.
Yes.
But what is the process of sending a person to the mortuary?
The doctor would say that this patient needs to go to mortuary, and they will be put on a trolley and wheeled to the mortuary, and then handed over to the mortuary attendant, and they will be put in the fridge or freezer.
Would there be any documentation done in that process?
Yes, they would say that this patient there should be a documentation.
So, with proper documentation of the entire process, and from what you have described, Should it happen that a person who is alive is sent to the mortuary as someone who is dead?
Something very wrong had happened in that situation, because time should have been taken to make sure that you look for all the signs of life in the person.
That was a major failure of the hospital.
It was.
And that was not the only failure during that time, was it? Tell us about the information that was collected from the patients who arrived at the hospital and what was done with regards to that.
When they arrived from Egypt, their documents, at first I could not recall taking them, but from
Perhaps before Egypt,
okay.
Let's talk about the first instance when the patients arrived. And of course, medical records would be generated with regards to these patients. Wasn't that the case?
It was.
Okay. Were these patients given their medical records, or were the medical records retained at the hospital?
The records were retained at the hospital.
At this stage, what was the normal process in the hospital with regards to documentation?
In the hospital, when a patient, for example, is admitted, you have a folder and your records are kept in. That's the doctors write in every day, and the observations and everything are put in a folder, and that folder is in the records office. When a patient is discharged, you are given a discharge card with a number. And whenever you came back, the records will be retrieved from the records office from your discharge card.
And what is the situation if the person wanted access to his medical or her medical records?
You would write a letter to the chief executive to ask for a medical report. And a medical report will be written by a doctor who is in that department that you are requesting the report from.
And would the records be provided?
The letter, the medical report that you need will be provided, but we did not give patients the records that we have in the hospital. They were kept in files in the records office.
But if a patient needed, say, copies of those documents, would those copies be provided as a matter of course?
Usually, we would not copy the records for them. We would say that these are hospital records. And that is how we operated.
But on this particular instance, was government policy different from the norm that you have just described?
Well, this was an unusual situation where we were given instructions not to allow patients to have those records.
Who gave those instructions?
The instructions would come from the State House, and I will assume that it's from the former president.
Was that normal?
It was not normal.
So you suggesting, therefore, that you were ordered by State House not to give these patients their medical records, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you accept that that was not normal?
It was not normal.
Did you comply with those instructions?
I complied because we're working under very difficult circumstances.
What made those circumstances difficult?
I mean, because we are not under a democracy, I should say, and we had to take instructions. But let me quickly add that I never took any instructions, if ever, concerning the well-being of the patient. But administratively, I took those instructions.
which instructions did you take administratively?
That was not to allow their records to be given to them.
And you knew at the time that this was wrong?
If they, as I said previously, the records were kept in the records office. It's when they needed a medical report that would be different from copying the records that we have as a hospital. They would have medical record, but in this instance, we did not give them medical reports if they requested.
You accept that was wrong?
I accept it was wrong.
And you said you complied with those wrong or unlawful instructions, correct?
Yes, I will say correct.
So my question earlier was, why did you comply with those unlawful instructions?
As I said, I don't want to say it's out of fear, but it was very, it was...
Dr. Jallo, call a spade a spade.
Maybe it was out of fear.
Maybe it was out of fear?
It was out of fear.
That is your categoric statement. It was out of fear. Correct?
Yes.
What were you afraid of?
I wouldn't like to say specifically, but anything could have happened to me. Anything could have happened to me if I disobeyed those instructions.
What made you believe that? We want to know your state of mind as at the time you received those instructions and did what you did. So, because if we do not know that state of mind, we would not know exactly why you did what you did. What was there that made you feel fear or feel afraid at the time?
I think being under a dictatorship and knowing that I could be imprisoned or something bad could happen to me if I was found to be on the wrong side of the ex-president, it made me fear.
Essentially, you are telling us you were afraid of Yaya Jammeh.
Yes, I was.
You were afraid Yaya Jammeh would do something to you if you did not comply with those instructions.
Yes.
So you carried on and implemented an unlawful instruction, correct?
I did.
Good. Having received these instructions to deny these victims access to their medical records, what did you do to implement those instructions?
I still want to clarify that if a medical, okay, what I did was to tell the nurses that their records were not to be given out, and also the records office that their records were not to be given out.
Did you ensure that the nurses and the clerks in the records office complied with your instructions?
I did not have cause to believe that they would not comply, because I could not go there every day to ask whether they have done what I have said, but I just assumed that they wouldn't, because if they did, they would also have to answer for it. It would not be my responsibility.
All right, fair enough. do you know at that time whether there were some patients who wanted to go abroad for medical treatment?
Yes, I know.
Specifically, were you aware of some who wanted to go abroad for medical treatment or at their own expense?
It may be difficult for me to remember, but I know that some people wanted to go for medical treatment abroad.
And you know that it is basically difficult, if not even impossible, to be able to go abroad for medical treatment without a medical report or the medical records.
Yes, without a medical board.
The denial, therefore, of those people to access to their medical records, in fact, made it impossible for them to access medical treatment abroad. Isn't that true?
It's true, but those who needed medical treatment abroad were sent for medical treatment abroad.
We heard from one Umi Jan yesterday. She was shot twice on her arm, on the same arm. She needed medical treatment abroad, but she couldn't have access to her medical records. What do you say to that?
I don't remember about that lady, but if she needed a medical report or medical board, she would write to the chief executive, and then they would set up a board by the director of health services. The medical board was set up by the director of health services. So even if there was a report from the chief executive's office to the director had to set up the medical board. And that medical board is what would be used, the recommendations would be what would be used for medical treatment abroad.
But that procedure aside, individuals can privately organize for themselves to go abroad for treatment. Isn't that possible?
That is possible.
In such scenarios, so these individuals would still need copies of their medical records in order to be able to finalize processes for admission to treatment abroad. Isn't that the case?
What I know in terms of getting visas and all that, what is recognized is a medical board report. And that medical board report is signed by 3 different doctors. And that is the procedure that the embassies recommend. So that is what I know. And if Madame had written a letter and a medical board was requested from the director and it was not granted, then it means that the situation was not only the hospital, but it was also at the directorate level.
Were the victims informed that they needed to apply to the medical board?
Well, I as a person did not tell them anything like that.
Did you inform your nurses and members of the records office to inform the patients, the victims, that they needed to apply to the medical board?
I did not.
Would you consider that that is an important omission?
Yes, maybe I should have told them, but anyone who needed to go abroad for overseas treatment, you would come to the hospital and ask that I need overseas treatment, and you'll be told what to do. So as I was saying, this situation was completely different from normal.
In fact, it was worse than that, isn't it?
Yes.
Considering that the nurses were instructed that medical records should not be given on no account to the victims. Isn't that the case?
Yes, as I said, the medical records were not given to any patients, anyone who wanted. We did not copy out medical papers that were in the files for patients. What happens is you have a letter, a medical report, detailing everything that is needed to be detailed there. Because the medical records in the hospital have got different notes, patients, doctors, different doctors, what they write and all those things. So we don't, maybe it is a wrong procedure which must be changed, but that is not the procedure that we take.
Yeah, I think here we're doing some form of legal hair splitting. We're trying to distinguish between the medical records and the medical report. Isn't that what you're doing at the moment? You're distinguishing the two and trying to lay out a different procedure for the two types of documents, correct?
Yes.
Good. Okay. But let's concern ourselves now with documents showing a person's medical condition. Call it a medical report or the records that were produced by the doctors. There was a blanket refusal for these people, for the victims, to have access to these documents. Was that the case or was that not the case?
That was the case.
Good. In fact, the position was taken because of the politics that surrounded the shooting of these victims, correct?
Correct.
They were in fact told that their case was political, and that is the reason why they were being denied of these records, correct?
Correct.
And that was unlawful.
It was unlawful.
Thank you very much. But this pertains to the beginning itself, just soon after the shooting. But the policy continued even with those who went for treatment abroad, isn't it?
Yes.
Now tell us about those who went, before we talk about those who went for treatment abroad, let's talk about the autopsies. Were autopsies conducted?
Yes, they were.
And was a coroner's inquest also conducted? I think there was a coroner's inquest. Perhaps we received the documents, so we should not bother you with that. So let's take it there was a coroner's inquest on these things. But soon after the shootings, President Jammeh visited the hospital, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Were you present?
I think, yes, I was present.
Did you accompany him in his rounds in the wards to see the victims themselves?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell us what you observed during that period?
It's a long time ago, but he came round to ask them how they were doing and all that. That was what I remember. And the doctors were also there. The doctors who were treating the patients were also there. And they gave an update of what was happening to the patients.
And how would you describe that? I'll give you my own proposition, and you tell me whether that is true or false. Was it a show to make the president believe that all was well, when under the facade, it was far from well?
In terms of their medical conditions, the doctors were there, and they were the ones who would give a report.
That is obvious, but it does not answer the question. The proposition is what was presented to the president was a show to make believe that all was well, when in reality there were big problems. What do you say to that?
I will say yes.
Why was that done?
Because he was the president, and I wouldn't say that I made a show, but what I'm saying is that the clinicians in charge of the patients would give an update, and their update was, I wouldn't say it was false, but probably they wouldn't say it as it was.
The thing is, the adjectives you are using are going on either direction. You're suggesting it was false, you're suggesting that it may not have been false. What was the situation? Was it all make-believe, just to reassure the president, to make a show of the situation, when in fact there were serious problems? What do you say to that?
I will say yes.
In fact, we've been told that the Egyptian doctors assured Jammeh that they could handle all the injuries and treatment. Do you recall that?
Yeah, that's the reason I cannot recall details, but that's why I was saying that it was the medical doctors who were giving the information. I could not give the information, so it's true what you are saying.
But you are a medical doctor, correct?
I'm a medical doctor, but I'm not a surgeon.
Yes, but you are a medical doctor nonetheless.
Yes.
You cannot be hoodwinked or bamboozled by a surgeon.
Yes.
See? So when you see it, you can at least form an opinion, a correct opinion, even though basic it may be, on the condition of the person and the surgical needs.
Yes.
So, but you were there, you knew that the reports they were giving were far from truthful.
But I would say that at the time, maybe they felt they could manage it here, but as time went on and we were seeing the patients day by day, we realized that there were certain things that cannot be done here.
But Dr. Jallo, you said a little earlier that you knew that these reports were false. It was a show. Correct?
Yes.
And you were CEO of the hospital.
Yes.
You had a responsibility to the patients, correct?
Yes, I had.
You had a responsibility to government.
Yes.
And here was the president. He was giving false accounts just to make him believe certain facts. Did you correct the reports that this is perhaps maybe an exaggeration of what is possible, that these statements are false? If you did not tell us you did not, and why didn't you?
Because as I said, the treating doctor knows better knew better than me. So I could not argue with them in front of the person to say what you are saying is not true.
But isn't it the case, Dr. Jallo, that you simply would not wish to deliver bad news to the president?
Yes, I would say that then.
Was that the reason why you didn't say anything?
I cannot remember exactly that.
Okay, I would leave it at that. So you accompanied Jammeh during his rounds. How did you see his relationship with the victims who were at the hospital at the time?
He looked concerned. I cannot know what was in his heart, but he showed outwardly that he was concerned.
How did the victims receive him?
They were not happy.
How do you know that?
Because I remember one of them refused to talk to him. So I knew.
One of them or all of them?
Maybe all of them, but I recall maybe all of them. I'm not sure now. But I know they were not happy.
Why were they not happy, as far as you know?
Because they had suffered under a command that at that time we did not know who it was, but we knew that somebody had asked that they be shot. So I was not sure who it was, but the victims felt that the government had a hand in what was happening to them, and therefore it was, should I say, hypocritical to them. That's how they felt, I think.
At least that's what you observed from them. Did any of them utter words to the president that would not ordinarily be said to a president? To put it blatantly, did some of them insult him, as far as you recall?
I cannot recall that.
All right, okay, we would move on. There were a group of victims who were taken abroad for treatment. Do you recall that?
I recall it.
Could you tell us what you know about that?
There were, I think, 3 people who needed further medical treatment, and a medical board was done on them, and recommendations were done that they needed further treatment abroad. So places were sought for them, but in the end, a directive came, I know must be from the president's office, ex-president, sorry, and they were booked to go to Egypt for further treatment. There were 3 of them.
You said directives came from the office of the ex-president. In simple terms, you're suggesting Yahya Jammeh decided that these 3 be sent to Egypt for further treatment.
Yes.
Do you know, okay, now let me rephrase, which institution in government finalized or concluded the arrangements with Egypt for this treatment to happen?
We had Egyptian doctors in the hospital, and so we had addresses. That time we had bilateral relationship with Egypt, and the funding would come from State House or from the overseas treatment vote, but the reports and the booking of the place would be from the hospital, I think.
Okay, in this case, do you recall who concluded the booking and the arrangements? Was it the hospital or?
No, because we did not have the funds for that.
So State House was to provide the funding, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. But who finalized the arrangements to get the hospital and the place in the hospital?
We had an Egyptian doctor, so I'm trying to remember whether we got the addresses from him, but the medical records and all would be passed through the hospital administration to the hospital in Egypt.
Essentially, the RVTH did the referral.
Yes.
Okay. And how about the funding?
The funding, as I said, we had bilateral relations with Egypt, so I don't know whether it was government that funded it or the Egyptian government, but it was not the hospital. The hospital did not have a vote for overseas treatment.
All right. So As far as you recall, the payment for this trip was done by which institution? Which part of government?
Maybe State House, maybe.
Do you know whether any consultations was done with family members of the victims? These were children at the time, whether parental consents were obtained?
Not as far as I know.
Well, the referral was done by the hospital. Wouldn't it be normal as part of the procedures to obtain parental consent for minors?
It would be.
But you cannot recall whether those parental consents were obtained?
I cannot recall.
Okay. But for the treatment of these three people, a medical board recommended the treatment abroad. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you know the duration of treatment Gambia government paid for with respect to these children?
I cannot remember, but I think they were there for more than 2 weeks, I think.
They were there for 3 months.
3 months.
Apparently, the government paid for only 1 month of treatment. Are you aware of that?
No.
Whose responsibility was it? I'm sorry, did I?
No, it's
okay,
a
good.
fly.
Okay, all right, good. I didn't mean to scare you, sir. Husky voice. Whose responsibility was it to coordinate with the Egyptian institution responsible for treatment and to follow up, to check on these people to see that everything was going on well?
I think it should be the hospital as well as the funders, because as I've just heard, they were funded for only 1 month. I don't know how that happened and how they were able to stay there for 3 months.
Well, precisely, that is the problem. It does not appear that there was any coordination or follow-up or monitoring by the hospital that was supposed to do so.
I agree.
That is another fundamental failing.
Yes.
And you are the head of the hospital at the time.
I was.
The responsibility falls on you.
I did.
What do you say to these young boys who were sent to Egypt for treatment and the bill was not paid? They had to be there, depending on the largesse of other people, to fund their treatment. What do you say to them?
I say to them that I have failed them, the nation has failed them in keeping them there without proper funding and adequate funding. We have failed as an individual, and as a government, we had failed them. And we want to say that we actually failed them.
Do you feel sorry?
Very sorry.
Do you realize that they were accompanied by a nurse who spent only 1 week with them?
Yes, I know the nurse came back.
They were left there alone, just by themselves.
That is what happened.
Callous, would you say?
I think any adjective that is used is appropriate. It was a system that had failed from myself to every other person. I accept that I had failed, but as I said earlier, we were living under abnormal circumstances.
What was abnormal about it?
I mean, here are young children that have been violated by the government that should protect them. That was abnormal.
In fact, several letters were written to the government demanding payment, but there were no responses to those letters.
That was also a failure. The government should definitely have responded and sponsored them. It was another failure. It was another callous action, and it was not proper.
And the government was very quick to send them air tickets when those were requested for the repatriation of the inadequately treated boys to return to this country. What do you say to that?
As I said, that was unkind. Insensitive and regrettable.
So these boys, Seni Senghor, Yusuf Ambai, and Asan Suare, they could not complete their treatment in Egypt, and they had to come back home on their own to Gambia. You have the opportunity to speak to them now. Speak to them directly. Say to them what you think.
Young men, you are young men today. The system had failed you, and I was part of that system, and I cannot exonerate myself. But as I said, things were not normal. And I want to say to you that anything I did whilst you were admitted, I did it with a clean heart, with no intention of harming you. And I went out of my way to make sure that you got the best treatment that was available here. We wanted to make you comfortable, and we did not want to expose you to undue harm or danger. And the fact that you had to go to Egypt and left there, it was regrettable. We were not in a position as a hospital to send any funds because funding was not available in the hospital. So I would like to say that this should not have happened. It has happened. But I say to you that I had no evil intention. I just happened to be in a position where medically I did my best. Administratively, I was not able to go beyond what I did. So I want to say to you, as an individual, you pardon me if there's any time you felt that I was unkind or I did not do what I was supposed to do. In terms of your medical attention, I made sure that you had the best that was available. But administratively, I was unable to do more than I did. So I would like to say that I feel pain. I feel pain because I did my best, and probably my best was not good enough for you. But I just want to say that I did not mean to harm you, and I would want you, if you have any grudge against me for anything, just forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you. And when these young people manage to find their way in Gambia, You met them at the airport, didn't you?
I did.
How did you know of their impending arrival?
I had said, maybe, that time there was no direct, one single way of receiving information. But mostly information would come maybe from State House to say that they were coming, since they are the ones who got the ticket. So I was informed that
Who in State House would normally call you to give you instructions?
sometimes it would be maybe the Secretary General or Chief of Protocol, or, yeah, those two mainly.
On this particular occasion, can you recall who called you?
I cannot recall exactly.
But do you recall what you were told?
I was told that they were arriving from Egypt, and I knew the flight time and everything, so I decided to go to the airport to meet them, because the ambulance could have gone alone without me, but I did not feel that I should do that.
Good. So you personally went to the airport to receive them?
I did.
Okay. And could you tell us what happened when they arrived?
We came back to the hospital in the ambulance straight away, and I got their medical records from Egypt. That is what happened.
Why did you take their medical records from Egypt?
The medical records would tell us what was done in Egypt and if there was anything more that should be done.
That is from a medical standpoint. But the question is, why did you take their medical records?
As I said earlier on, their medical records and all were to be kept in the hospital. So that is why I was instructed to take their medical records.
Who instructed you to take their medical records?
It would, from State House, the ex-president, maybe not directly talking to me, but through a message.
And this time around, do you recall who delivered you that message?
So it's the same person who told me about the coming of the victims.
So essentially, or let me rephrase the question, was this part of the same initial policy that these people, their case is political, so therefore they should not have access to their medical records?
Yes, it was.
So you were instructed to take their documents?
Yes.
And you took the documents?
I did.
And how about, in fact, knowing fully well that they are being denied of records that they are entitled to, correct?
Can you rephrase that, please?
You took those documents from them, knowing fully well that they are being denied access to material that they are entitled to.
At that time, I would not be thinking that way.
How were you thinking at that time?
I was thinking that they had gone for treatment and they are back, so we had to know what the treatment was about and what else could be done, or what was the recommendation from Egypt.
But that aside, you also knew that a government was giving you an unlawful order to confiscate documents. Is that not true?
Yes, it's true.
And therefore, these people were being denied material that they were entitled to.
Yes,
correct?
They were denied.
Why did you do so?
We are coming back to the same, I used the word fear, but I mean, I was a civil servant, and I was given instructions that I could not refuse.
Could you say that again? Sorry, I was
I said,
not distracted. I was consulting with my learned colleague to the left.
I said I was given instructions, I was a civil servant, and I was taking instructions.
As a civil servant, with such great education that you have, it should be quite obvious that there is no defense to accepting unlawful orders. Correct?
Okay, correct.
I can accept that you are afraid, but that is aside from accepting unlawful orders simply because you are a civil servant.
No, that's not what I meant.
Explain
So
what you
I'll
mean.
retract that statement. What the statement was that I took orders because I knew the circumstances under which we were working. Not the simple fact that I was a civil servant.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will leave it at that. It's now very clear. The documents that were confiscated from these young boys, where were they taken to?
They would be part of their medical records.
So you submitted them to the records office? And if we need to look for them now, they should be found at the records office?
They should be found in the hospital somewhere.
All right. Okay. In the case of Yusufa, the person who was paralyzed from neck downwards, what was the position taken when he arrived?
When he arrived,
Was there an effort to have him discharged immediately?
I don't know.
When they arrived, did you ask them, or did you inform some of them that they would go home?
I think we brought all of them to the hospital. I think, if I remember.
Did you ask them if they wanted to go home?
No.
Did you suggest that they should be discharged?
Suggest to who?
To
Sorry?
them. The
To
three.
them?
Yes.
I think they were all brought to the hospital, if I remember.
Well, two of them were taken to the hospital. Okay, I leave that point. There is this suggestion that they were to be discharged soon, immediately they arrived, but that did not happen. So I'll leave the point. Mr. Mbai was to again go for a second treatment in Scotland. Do you remember that?
I don't know whether, I don't remember. Whether I was around, I don't know.
Hold a second. Few months after they returned, Mr. Mbai was to go for a second treatment. A hospital in Dundee in Scotland. I can read out from his statements to you. He said as follows: I was taken back to the RVTH for a year when I was flown to Scotland, but no treatment was ever offered. And 1 year would be 1 year into that period would be sometimes in 2002. What was your position in 2002?
2002.
No, it can't be 2001. It has to be 2002. I did the maths. You know, few months at RVH, 3 months in Egypt. That would be minimum 5 months plus 1 year. That's 17 months. It can only be in 2002. Lawyers are not good in maths, but this one
I was away in September 2001.
Good. So you may not have been there when he went to Scotland. But in Scotland too, he did not get treatment. Apparently, Gambia government owed the hospital in Scotland, and the money that was paid was set off against the debt Gambia government owed. What do you say to that? No comment?
No comments.
So Mr. Mbai had to come back home disappointed, no treatment. What do you say to that?
That was very... the system had failed him again.
The third or the fourth time, almost fourth time. I would not bother you much about this treatment again because we've established the facts. But there was another treatment program this president was involved in. Do you recall that?
The president?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I recall.
The ex-president.
The ex-president, I recall.
Which treatment program was that?
It was the HIV treatment program.
What was the official name?
Presidential treatment program.
And in that program, or the alternative treatment program, as was called by some, you participated in that, didn't you?
Yes, somehow.
We would hold a special hearing on that subject. Okay. But since you are here with us, I just want to ask you few preliminary questions. Amongst the diseases the president claimed to have had a cure included, you tell us.
HIV.
And AIDS.
HIV, AIDS, yes. Asthma, hypertension, and later on, tuberculosis was added.
Okay. The question I would ask relates to HIV/AIDS. You are here under oath. Was the treatment program truthful or was it a hoax?
It was a hoax.
It was a lie.
It was a lie.
And the doctors who participated in that knew it was a lie.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Witness. I would call you again as a witness on this very important subject. Mr. Chair, it's almost 1:30. I hand over the witness to you. Thank you very much.
Is it your intention, counsel, for the witness to come back in the afternoon after the lunch break or not? Wait for you to finish your consultations.
Yes, Mr. Chair, sorry, I was consulting with my colleagues.
I suspected that. As it, is it your intention to bring the witness back after the lunch break or not?
No.
You finished with the
we would bring the witness back when we do our investigation on the presidential treatment program.
Yeah, I understood that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. But for today, after your questionings and her statement, she should be discharged until we call her again.
Thank you for that clarification and your remark that lawyers are not good at math. They are, however, very good at calculating how much they're charging their clients, and they keep...
Very much so, except that in this case, that wasn't the case, but anyway.
And they're the ones who get the plum jobs, not the mathematicians. I have the story of the CEO who was hiring somebody in his office and didn't have time to conduct anything more than 3 interviews on a particular day. And he said, bring in these 3 individuals, and I'll ask them all just one question. And the 3 individuals were mathematician, economist, and a lawyer. And the question that he said he was going to ask, because he was very busy that day, was, what is 2 plus 2? They brought in the mathematician, and he just said, look, I don't have time. What's 2 plus 2? Mathematician's answer was 4 plus 0 minus 0. Thank you very much, he left. Economist, 4, depending on the circumstances. And the lawyer came in, said, what's 2 plus 2? Say, what do you want to hear? And he was the one who really was given the plum job.
Wonderful.
Anyway, short story on that. Thank you very much, Counsel, for the questions, and thank you very much, Dr. Jallo. One quick question for you, Dr. Jallo. When these individuals came back from Egypt, what exactly did you tell them to retrieve the medical records from them? And what was their understanding of what was to happen to those records?
There wouldn't have been a long conversation. I'll just say, where are your medical reports so that we can know what happened in Egypt?
Was there any resistance on their part, or hesitation, or suspicion, perhaps?
There was no hesitation, I don't think.
They trusted you.
I don't know whether they trusted me, but I should suppose they should have trusted me.
So they trusted you with their medical records, but the system betrayed them later.
Yes.
Commissioners, if you have any questions. Yes, Commissioner Imam Jallo, you have the floor, please.
Witness,
Sir.
taking into consideration your religious standing and your professional ethics, why did you allow yourself to remain in this situation and not resign from your position?
Professionally, I'm a medical doctor, and I felt that I was still doing a good job. I was still doing my profession as I should as a doctor, taking care of the patients, making sure that the hospital ran. As I said, I did not feel that I should resign because of this. I did not think there was any reason to resign, because I knew that I still had something to offer to the nation.
Thank you very much. If there are no further... Oh, Commissioner Kinte, you have the floor, please.
Sir.
Those who went to Egypt said what they have been told was that they have been overkept inadequate attendance in Banjul, which aggravated their conditions, and probably that made their treatment more complicated and insufficient. What are your comments about that?
Well, it would have been good to evacuate them immediately. We had a situation, but as it was, to go to another country, they needed to have a place to go to, they needed to have the documentation and all that. I think the doctors, if they said that from Egypt, I will not challenge them. It means that the referral was not soon enough, was not quick enough. I will not dispute what they said. So in essence, the system has failed, because in a situation like this, there should be a quick way of evacuating patients to the right place. So the system actually failed them.
My second question is, we've been told yesterday or day before that one small boy, age 3, was shot by a stray bullet. And what was explained here was that the guy was kept 3 days with bullet in the head, unattended for 3 days. Were you aware, and what do you comment?
I cannot remember, but if we see the records, then we will know why the patient was kept for 3 days. Because sometimes the condition of the patient is such that, I don't want to start going into details, but when we see the records, we'll know why. There must have been a reason, probably. Whether the risk was high or what, I don't know. But I cannot remember specifically a situation like that.
Yeah, and indeed, it was the father who had to go to the doctors to say, can you please allow me? In fact, the father was advised to advocate for the release of the child or for the transfer of the child to Senegal. The father made all efforts at his own expense to get the child to Senegal. Amazingly, the bullet was removed in Senegal, and the child lived for 2 months in Senegal. Had the guy not stayed, and there also the comment was, the boy was overkept at RVTH. Had the bullet been removed within 24 hours or 30 hours, one would have been optimistic that the boy would have made it and would have been useful to Gambia today. What are your comments?
They are right. As I said, we have a long way to go, because in such situations, we should be able to evacuate patients very quickly to centers where we know can do better than we can do. So really, it's a failure on the part of the system, and it was not brought to my attention, or I did not really realize, but X-rays could have been done to see whether there was a bullet, and it also depended, I don't know whether at that time there was a neurosurgeon who could remove that, because sometimes if you attempt something you cannot do, you actually harm the patient. So there may have been many reasons, but I'm not giving any excuse for that. It was a failure of the system, and on behalf of the system, I must apologize.
Thank you very much, indeed. Dr. Jallo, if you have any final remarks to make, please proceed to do so now.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say what I have said so far. And my main statement would be to the victims I mean the children who suffered and went to Egypt and came back, and as you are saying, the parents of this young boy also, that at the time we did what we thought best we could do. The system had failed in many aspects, and as part of the system, I will not exonerate myself, and I would just like to assure the victims, the students who are now grown-ups, that whatever I did it out of a pure heart, and I did not mean to harm them. And the other thing I would like to say is that it is important that we have a democratic system where things will not be done haphazardly, where everybody will feel free and feel able to do what you are supposed to do without being intimidated. So I think that the systems should be changed, and democracy at all costs must be maintained, because we cannot go back to the other system where we're all living under intimidation and we could not practice our professions in the way that we should do. And if there's anything that I did to any of the children, now grown-ups, and they felt I was unkind, I would like to assure them that I was not unkind. I did my best, and I couldn't have done better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for those remarks. And we will come to the end of our proceedings for today and for the week as well. We will resume our hearings on Monday, sharp 10 o'clock. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.